After winning the California primary in June of 1968, Robert Kennedy was moving through a narrow pantry at the Ambassador Hotel when shots rang out. He had no Secret Service or police protection.
Police were not considered very friendly to those individuals who were perhaps the strongest supporters of Senator Kennedy. And so they had asked us to stay away.
Eyewitnesses recall that Sirhan was some distance from Kennedy.
I know that Sirhan, in that initial burst of firing, he wasn't with the gun to Bob Kennedy's head. I think that most of the eyewitnesses saw it that way too.
But the autopsy reported powder burns on Kennedy's ear near the fatal wound. Unsolved history firearms examination confirmed Coroner Noguchi's findings that the gun had to be very close, only 1 inch away from Kennedy's head. Journalist Dan Moldea has investigated this case for 16 years. He believes that Sirhan acted alone in the assassination, but disagrees with many of the LAPD's conclusions. We invited him to explain how Sirhan got in so close without being seen. He picks up the scene with Euchre, the maitre d', leading Kennedy through the pantry.
He's bringing him through, stops here. Euchre then takes him by the right wrist again and trying to lead him through the pantry so he can get through quickly. Now he drops his hand, bang. There's a crowd of 77 people in this pantry who are pushing forward. I believe that the first shot hits Paul Schrade. Kennedy reacts defensively. He sees his friend, Paul Schrade, fall and shot. So that's his final words. When he's finally down on the ground, he knows Paul Schrade's been shot, and he asks, "How's Paul?" I believe he reacts defensively, but the crowd pushes him back into the table, which is stationary, which gives Sirhan the opportunity to shoot him at point-blank range.
So that explains...
No one saw the gun at point-blank range. Why did all the witnesses misjudge the distance of the gun?
Everyone was relaxed. No one expected a moment of history to occur in this kitchen pantry. And I think that there were a dozen people who were looking at Kennedy when the shooting began, and I believe that their view of the muzzle distance, 6 feet more or less, was accurate. It's just that I believe that first shot missed Kennedy and hits Paul Schrade back here.
But what I'd like to see, and see in slow motion so nobody gets hurt, is whether or not we can get the trajectories to match up and get this short distance as well. So let's try it.
Kennedy's shaking hands. He has now released the handshake. Euchre's now taking him past. Bang! The first shot. Paul Schrade is hit.
Yeah.
Euchre steps in front of Sirhan. Kennedy is now being pushed by the crowd into the steam table that is bolted to the ground. He can't move. Sirhan opens up.
And so it's bang, bang.
And I think he's falling at this. He's falling at this time as well. Let's put your head up here. You know, who can tell how a body is reacting as it's being shot? But this is how I believe it happened.
Okay, hold on though. We've got an 8-shot weapon. We've fired 4 shots. What happens now?
I think Kennedy has now disappeared from view as Sirhan is now firing wildly into the crowd. So I believe the first shot hits Paul Schrade.
Right.
2, 3, 4, 5 hit Kennedy or go through the shoulder pad of his jacket.
And then 3 more
5, 6, 7, 8
into the crowd.
Are fired into the crowd.
But perhaps there is another explanation. Ted Chirac believes that no one saw Sirhan deliver the fatal shots because there was a second gunman in the pantry, standing just behind Kennedy.
Sirhan absolutely did not kill Bobby Kennedy. All the shots from in front of Senator Kennedy hit the victims behind. 5 victims.
The ambassador hired a handful of guards to help with crowd control that night. Thane Caesar was assigned to the pantry. He wore a uniform and claimed to be carrying a .38 caliber revolver. When the senator came into the pantry, he moved in behind him. Caesar continued to shadow Kennedy as they moved through the pantry. Scott Enyart remembers seeing the guard in the pantry that night.
Sirhan starts firing. The maitre d' reaches over and grabs for the gun. Thane Caesar draws his weapon and falls. As Kennedy falls to the floor, he and Caesar both go down together.
In interviews, Caesar gave several different versions of his actions that night. Sometimes he drew the gun before he fell. sometimes after.
There seems to be confusion on this business of him getting down, drawing his gun, falling forward, falling backwards. How can we explain that? Do we know?
He's given me different versions over the years. He told the police in his initial report that he had drawn his gun and then he fell down.
So at the least, he's an unreliable witness. Okay. And then there's the point of conspiracy. You've got Sirhan here with his gun. He's firing in this sort of arc of fire. And it seems extremely unlikely that there's a conspiracy going on between Caesar and Sirhan because, of course, he is in the line of fire himself. It would appear that conspiracy between these two players is most unlikely. What
That's
would you
why
say
for
to
many
that?
years, many of us believe that if Caesar's gun had gone off, it had gone off accidentally. The problem is that Kennedy was hit 4 times. Very unlikely that somebody could have fired their weapon 4 times accidentally.
Right.
Thane Caesar absolutely did not fire that gun accidentally. What happened is that he pulled the gun out, he lost his balance, he got pushed, and he fell to the floor. And in those moments, 4 shots, and he didn't hang around to protect Bobby Kennedy. He panicked, and he ran out of that kitchen pantry after chuckling that he saw the blood.
The Los Angeles police don't agree with Mr. Chirac.
We've ruled out his gun. Not only did we rule it out, but every other expert that looked at all of this ruled it out.
It is time to bring back the players and analyze the shots with the laser gun behind Senator Kennedy. Michael Yardley plays the part of the security guard.
So here we are. Can we get these trajectory lines to line up? And I think the simple answer to that is yes. Bang, bang, the shot into the cloth, and then falling backwards, bang. So, unfortunately, it appears at the moment we've got 2 scenarios which seem more or less to work.
But there are problems with the Thane Caesar scenario.
Well, let's ask a basic question. What caliber of bullet was found inside Kennedy?
Well, a good question.
It was a 22.
A 22.
What was Caesar holding? A
We don't
38.
know. Ah, now that, of course, though, is the issue. Was he really holding a 38?
The question of which gun was in Thane Caesar's holster remains a mystery. He owned both a 38 and a 22 caliber revolver.
He had a Harrington and Richardson 22 9-shot.
And he sold it under rather mysterious
He
circumstances.
lied about when he had sold it, or he had conveniently mistaken when he had sold it.
And moreover, for some inexplicable reason on the day, the police did not take charge of all the weapons at the scene.
The LAPD could have answered many of these questions, but only recovered Sirhan's revolver. Robert Joling claims they mishandled the investigation in other areas as well.
When they got there, they did not cordon off the scene as it should have been cordoned off. They did not collect any guns that were within that room except Sirhan's. They did not talk to Caesar and get his gun and test his hands to see whether or not there was any powder residue in his hands. They did not test even Sirhan's at that point.
Thane Caesar currently lives in the Philippines. He has repeatedly stated that he never fired his gun that night, intentionally or accidentally. Next, we look at the whole event, tracking the bullets fired at Kennedy and the other victims. Can the experts explain all the damage in the pantry with just the 8 bullets from Sirhan's revolver?